let's step through an example of a little bit of code that will kind of give you a little bit of the flavor of what it looks like doing a little bit of interaction with the SDK specifically, and that hopefully you'll see that it's surprisingly easy to kind of play with and build automations. So I have this is the little bit of code that I wanted to step through. So I think what we'll do is that I will open up in my shell, and we'll kind of go as we go, and I'll narrate a little bit what's going on. So let's start Python. All right, so very basic. In this case, we'll just import what we need. So we will need the LimaCharlie SDK and JSON, just because we'll format some JSON that we want to output to the screen. So as I mentioned, the manager is kind of the core library. So whenever you're starting to do something in the SDK, this is pretty much what you will want to instantiate. So we're going to call it LC. And the parameters that you can see, we're giving it two parameters. So one is interactive, and we're saying it is. And the other one is the investigation ID. So is interactive says, hey, yeah, I want to get direct real-time feedback from my sensors. The investigation ID is a unique identifier that that we will use to track the commands that you're sending through, as well as all the responses coming back. So we will we'll use that. So in this case, we're specifying it's an arbitrary string. In real life, you probably want to use some random thing. So we often use a UUID that we generate. But in some specific cases, it might be useful to use a static value to trace or to do a little bit of a distributed service. It's more complex. So we've instantiated. It took a split second for the object to get created. That's because we created this output. But now it's going. So there's a real HTTPS connection back. So the first thing we're going to do is we will find out which sensors that we have in our organizations, which ones are online. So creating an array, and I will iterate through lc.sensors. And that's a generator if you're a Python developer, meaning if you have like 2 million sensors, it'll still work fine. We'll iterate over it. For every sensor, we'll ask if it's online. If it is, then we'll add that object to our array. So I will just run this. So we're doing this a little bit naively in the sense that we're going one by one, checking if it's online. Here we go. If you're building more advanced services, you might want to do things that parallelize some of this, and we actually have helpful classes for this in the SDK that allow you to specify tasks that you want to run in parallel, because so much of this uses a REST interface, so it's very asynchronous. So, okay, that's good. So we ran this. Let's now see. We're just going to okay, so we have 2 sensors online. That's easy. So next, what we'll do is we will do a little bit of reconnaissance on those boxes. So first is we'll define a new list that we'll call suspicious. And now we will iterate over the agents that are online. And we will do a simple request. So a simple request is pretty much what it sounds like. We're sending a task to that agent, and we want to synchronously receive a response, the data coming back from that task. There's other more complex ways to do requests, with futures or ways you don't have to wait for it. But again, we're sticking to the simpler stuff. So let's start putting this in. All right, so now we're going to do this. And we will get the response in services. So that's going to be the response, the data coming back. If you're wondering what it looks like, what the response looks like, test it. It's always the easiest way. Just run it and see what comes back. Otherwise, you can go in the historical view on the web app and just look at the events there. It's going to be the exact same thing, same format, the JSON. So in our case, what we'll do is we will take a specific part of the sensor, which is in the event. So the data coming back has an event and routing. So two components. Routing is just information about the host where this is coming from. Event is the payload, the data. So we're going to take the data and we're going to look in SVCS, which is services, is just where that's going to be the list of all the services that are on this box. So we'll take this and then we're going to do something for each of those services. So we're going to take that list of service and then we're going to iterate through it. So first we're going to say, well, if this is not a Windows box, just keep going. It's not in a very efficient spot, but just showing a little bit what you can do with a sensor object. So if it's not Windows, keep going. If there's no file is signed, which is the component of the coming back in a service that tells you if the file represented by the service is signed or not. So if that value is not in the service, it can be some corner cases in Windows where a file wasn't specified for service or things like that. So if it's not in there, we'll just ignore that service. And finally, okay, now we have a Windows service and we have an indication of whether or not the file is signed. Perfect. So we're going to print the host name of that sensor. So sensor.hostname, simple as that. And then we're going to print a pretty version of the JSON of coming from that service. And finally, we will add this particular sensor to the list of suspicious sensors that we have going. Pardon me, I will reissue that. I didn't copy paste all the way. There we go. All right. So now I just started this. Here we go. We just ran. Remember, we had 2 hosts online, so it didn't take too long. We can see that demo win 2012 is the host name where we've found a file that is not signed, a service that's not signed. And then we're just printing the details of that service. So whatever this is with the file and everything there. So, okay, that's cool. Now suspicious will really have just one sensor in there. So let's try something a little bit different with it. So far we've interacted directly in real time with that box, right? We've listed actively the services and checked those out. Now let's try to do something a bit more interesting as well. We're going to go through the list of suspicious sensors. In this case, there's just one. We're going to tag that particular sensor with the tag unsigned SVC, which is arbitrary. It's just something we want to use for our own purposes. And that tag will remain there for 1 hour. So for the next hour, the sensor will be tagged. Maybe we'll use this tag in some other part of IR that we're doing. The second thing we're going to do is I'm going to query LimaCharlie. So not the agent directly, but really LimaCharlie. And we're going to say sensor.get historic events. So this is saying, LimaCharlie, go in your retention and get the historic events for this box. And the 2 parameters you can see here are the start time and the end time. So here we're saying start 1 hour ago and end right now. So give me all of the events that I got from this box in the last hour. And then that's potentially, a non-trivial amount of data. So I will just print the number of events that I have in there. So if we just go here. There we go. There we go. So this is demo box. Nothing's really going on it. So you can see it's very, very low chatter in the last hour. We had 37 events. So it's not a whole lot, but these are events that are now like in your code available. And in fact, so if I want to just show one for reference, it's a list. So you can see I have, all the details of that event. So you can see how you can really extremely easily start interacting with your sensors, both in real time, but also query historical, events, get them in your script, run the transform, look for the things that you're interested in. You could also then, turn around and do an IOC search for, a specific unsigned file to see it historically if you've seen it somewhere else. So you can kind of leverage all of the features that are available in LimaCharlie. You could also turn around and say, you know what, dump our service, dump the physical memory from this box and upload it to LimaCharlie so that I can run volatility on it, things like that. It's extremely powerful as a glue to everything that you do in LimaCharlie. We use the SDK ourselves for vast majority of the services that we produce. So it's it's very much kind of a first class citizen for us. So this kind of concludes the demo around the SDK. It's it's one of those things that has a whole lot of power and a whole lot of depth. So I kind of encourage you to have a look at the public repo we have. So get on GitHub, so /refactoring_point/python-LimaCharlie. And from there, you'll also find some samples of code that do, various bits and pieces to give you some ideas. And you'll also find the actual reference documentation to the API itself.